Seth Worley here. Some of you may have seen my Recreating the Upside Down tutorial from way back when Stranger Things Season 1 first fell into our lives. Today I thought it'd be fun to do another Stranger Things thing to try and recreate the Mind Flayer, specifically the version we see in Season 2. Who knows, after this maybe I can learn like 1,000 more things and figure out how to make the wonderfully disgusting version from Season 3, but for now, we flay Season 2 style. I'm going to start with this reference image, which I'm going to set as a guide layer so it doesn't show up in any other comps or renders. I create a solid, and on that solid I trace the reference image to create paths for the legs. Then I apply trapcode DAO to this solid. It immediately traces the paths I've drawn, but I also need to turn off the path generator so I'm only seeing the mask-generated splines. So now I'm going to get this looking a little more Mind Flayery. In the segment settings, I set it to be a repeated sphere, turn the segment count up to 100, and the size down to 35. Then in the fractal displacement section, I set the space to segment, the amplitude to 7, the frequency to 5000, and for the evolution I alt-click the timer to give it an expression of time times 50. Then in the material section, I change the color to be just under white, turn the ambient, specular, and shininess all to 0. At this point, I'm going to go back to those masks I drew and select all the paths at once. Then I'm going to go to Window, Create Nulls from Paths, and select Points Follow Nulls. This generates a null for every point in these paths, and just like the button said, those points are going to do whatever the nulls do. So if I give wiggle expressions to all the nulls assigned to each leg's middle point, our Mind Flayer now flays a little wiggly, keeping the Mind Flayer looking at least a little bit alive. So now that I've done that, I'm going to do some weird stuff to get the surface of this thing looking more sandy. I'm going to be using a modified version of what Hashi teaches in his offensively superior Black Panther Cheap Tricks episode. So if you're interested in learning how to do what I'm about to do, but, better and less bad, I highly recommend going and watching that. So here's what I do. I apply a fastbox blur set to 5 with repeat edge on. Then I apply a vector blur set to 10. Then I apply roughen edges set to spiky, a border of 5, a scale of 10, and an expression applied to the evolution of time times 1000. Then I create a solid called texture, to which I apply fractal noise set to terrain with contrast at 150, scale at 1, and evolution with an expression of time times 5000. I turn off the visibility of that layer and I duplicate my DAO layer. On this new duplicate, I apply the texturize effect, setting the texture layer to my texture layer I just made, because that's why it's named that, with effects and masks taken into consideration, setting the contrast to 0.5. Then I apply CC ball action and set scatter to 1 and grade spacing to 0. And then I introduce you to my special friend, Sandy Mind Flayer. She definitely needs a head, so we'll give her one on a separate layer with all the same settings, only on this one, we make sure to set the path to taper at the ends. I'm also going to apply CC light sweep on the edge of Sandy's evil face to help separate her from her background. So Sandy still looks kind of terrible, but that's okay. Stay with me here, because now it's time to build our scene. I've got this plate, but it happens to be driving away from town rather than toward it, so I flip it horizontally, put it in reverse, so now we're driving into the danger. I do a camera track, and then I set about getting rid of that boring sky. I do this by duplicating the plate twice, naming one of them FG for foreground, and the other FG Matte. After the great Fitzgerald Matte. Didn't fully commit to this joke. On the foreground matte, I apply tint and levels, and I try to get the sky solid white and everything else solid black. Then I turn that layer off, and on the foreground layer, I apply the set matte effect, setting the matte layer to the foreground matte layer with effects and masks on. I set the layer type to luminance, and I check invert matte. So next I want to color this foreground to be darker and scarier. I apply a tint effect, and I map the white to a faded blue, setting the amount to 75%. Then I add a curves effect, and I dip those curves. I'm actually going to insert 2 different skies, and you'll see why in a minute. The first is this one, which I place into the scene, and I copy and paste the tint and curves from my foreground layer. The second sky is going to be our red, scary Stranger Things branded clouds, so I'll place those in the scene and apply a tint, then Video Copilot's free color vibrance plugin. I adjust the vibrance and gamma to suit my tastes here, and then I set the blending mode for this layer to screen. So now it blends with my other sky. And that's not the end here, but we're going to come back to this in a second, because now it's time to bring in Sandy. I get her situated, and then I go visit my good friends at Action VFX to get myself some nice atmospheric fog and smoke. I get a couple fog elements, and I drop them into Sandy's comp, placing them between her body and her head. This creates a nice simulation of depth, making Sandy look way bigger. She also still looks incredibly stupid, and you might be starting to worry that this was all a massive waste of time, and maybe you should just give up now and never attempt visual effects ever again. You could do that, or you could hang in there just a little longer and trust that this is going somewhere. Because now, it's time to summon some lightning. I place several point lights in the scene, keyframing their intensity to flash on and off, and set their color to a faded red. Now, let me show you why we made 2 skies. Right now the sky is only visible when the lights flash, But if I go to our background sky, the non-red one, and in its materials section I turn accept lights off, now the gray sky is visible at all times and the red only appears when the lights flash. Now I add a solid called lightning, make it 3D and place it in the same area as sandy in the skies. Like with our gray skies, I make sure accept lights is turned off, and I apply advanced lightning. I adjust it to be on brand with my red sky, and I keyframe the lightning's location points and opacity to flash on screen for one frame in sync with some of the flashes. Notice I said some of the flashes, not all of them. The lightning has more impact when it's only occasionally visible. Now I create some upside down ashes using Trapcode Particular, and then I add a second instance of it, but with bigger, blurrier, less opaque particles, creating a nice haze in the air. Arguably this whole thing is still looking pretty terrible, so it's time we did the real magic. As 3 separate pre-comps, I'm going to pre-comp the skies, sandy, and our lightning. Why? Because this is going to set us up for success as we move this into Supercomp. But wait, Seth, this clearly broke everything. Just calm down, okay? By clicking collapse transformations on these pre-comps, it's suddenly like nothing ever happened. So let's make sandy look beautiful. Scary. I select the sky, lightning, sandy, foreground, and both ash layers, and I apply Supercomp. Now I can do all my final compositing here. I click the sky and I apply an optical glow. I turn up highlights only to about 25, vibrance to 100, then I turn the amount down to 3 and the size up to 150. I like optical glow with a big size and low amount, if you know what I mean. On the lightning, I also apply an optical glow, setting the amount to 10 and the size to 650. Then I'm going to start sandy off with a preset, this foggy background one. I'm also going to apply a preset to our foreground, this one called Good Hair, because the name just, speaks to me. I add volume fog here as well, but this time I'm going to jack up the diffusion, adjust the depth, set the amount at 75, and adjust that center to match Sandy's. Then for the ashes, I use the hazy integration preset. And the ashy haze I actually set to be an additive layer and give it the screen-like preset and set the opacity to 50%. Okay, so now it's starting to look less stupid, but stand by, things are about to get even less stupid. I'm going to pre-comp everything, and then animate a nice camera move by keyframing the scale and position. Then I apply the camera shake tool from Red Giant Universe using the car mount preset, setting motion blur to medium. Look at that. You can just see the stupid draining out of it. Now I'll use Colorista 4's guided color correction to get the image balanced out and looking nice. Then I'll apply Magic Bullet Looks, where I've saved a library of looks presets that use all my favorite LUTs. I pick the LUT I want, and then for the final touch, I apply a nice layer of grain on top of everything, using Magic Bullet Renoiser's Hadley's Hope preset. Who's stupid now, huh? Actually, I am, because I forgot one little thing, so I'm going to go into my plate and add this one last little touch. So there you go. Please flay responsibly.